Bonus time, everybody.
Bonus episode.
Yeah. So we finally got Lee Stamper back on audio. Apologies to everybody for the technical difficulties at the end of the primary material where we couldn't get Lee's input on Los Lobos. So do you want to take a couple minutes and let Lee talk about Los Lobos?
Yeah, finish your thoughts on that, Lee.
Yeah, go Lee.
I didn't have much else to say about it, to be honest. I just really disliked all of it. I like the Latin stuff more than the regular rock stuff. But if I wanted to listen to that, I would just listen to Chicano Batman. I think they're infinitely better.
That's super funny because I actually thought about Chicano Batman. Like as we were talking about it, I thought about Chicano Batman a little bit as I was listening to it. And Chicano Batman is definitely not doing the same thing. Like Los Lobos is way more of a mainstream act than what Chicano Batman is. But I feel you. Like I was definitely thinking along those same lines.
And I was going to say that if I come to your house and you have that Los Lobos album on vinyl, I'm going to break it. So I'm good after that. That's all I needed to say.
I'll have to hide it. I'll have to hide my Los Lobos record if I ever fucking get one from Lee Stamper. Okay, well, everybody back on YouTube and back on the bonus material for the podcast. Like, obviously, this is a bonus material where we're now going to work through week by week. We're going to pick one album from the list of the Reddit Snub list that we did a while back as a bonus episode. And we're just kind of working through some of those albums because we realized that that snub list also probably sucks for the same reason that the big list sucks. And so this week, what we're doing is the debut album from the Flaming Lips entitled Here It Is from 1986. And obviously we don't have a description to read because this is coming from the Reddit sublist. But what'd you guys think?
You want to weigh in first, Lee, or what do you think?
I think it was similar to the debut record that you guys did last week for Queens of the Stone Age, in the sense that it kind of only hints at what the band is going to become. Like, if you listen to a lot of the Flaming Lips, that is not really what you would think of as a Flaming Lips album. It was a lot different, but I liked it a lot.
So I actually like this record a whole lot. And I hear what you're saying, like it's not what the Flaming Lips becomes, although I'm not really a good person to assess that because I've recently delved into the Flaming Lips. But I've listened to Yoshimi pretty extensively at this point after Mike just gave me a beaming recommendation on the band in general. But I was going to point out, in my opinion, just the stark contrast between this record and the one from last week. Because last week I had some pretty negative things to say about the Queens of the Stone Age debut record, and I just thought it was lifeless. And like the bones were there, but there was no real spirit to it for me. It just didn't have that spark that you want to hear. And I kind of felt the opposite about this record. I thought this was an incredible debut attempt. And although maybe they were a little all over the place stylistically and genre-wise, you heard them basically like fighting tooth and nail to find their sound and coming up with some really interesting stuff in the meantime. And
for the record, I think this is a much better album.
Yeah.
I'm not comparing in terms of quality.
Right, yeah. And I just thought all my complaints in terms of like the lifelessness of the Queens of the Stone Age debut, I have the opposite. I mean, like that's not a complaint for me at all here.
Yeah. Listen, I'm with both of you, right? Relative to Queens of the Stone Age, I enjoyed this album a whole lot more. It's funny because I have no experience with this album before. Like before this, the earliest Flaming Lips album that I would have listened to, or that I have listened to, is Satellite Transmissions from the Heart, which was the album that they broke with She Don't Use Jelly and stuff like that on it.
Yeah.
And so I'd never delved back in, but I have plenty of Flaming Lips merch and stuff like that. And it's funny because in a lot of the merch and stuff, like they refer to themselves as a punk rock band, and I didn't get it. But after listening to this, it totally made sense because this really, it feels, I think that what this album, the most accurate description for this album in my mind is psychedelic punk rock.
Yep, I get that. Almost like hardcore. Like some of it was pretty hard.
Yeah.
And for me, so like when a band is starting out, a lot of what you get is kind of like a stitching together of their influences. You know? So for me, for like the first 4 or 5 tracks, I was like writing down, oh, this sounds like this band. And I'll get specific with that. So with the very first song, With You, it sounded like Pink Floyd Mother. Until it did the choruses. So like the verses. That was a song where it had like this kind of slow acoustic type of chorus, and then when it goes, verse, and then when it goes to the chorus, it does this kind of crazy chaotic build up thing. So, but Pink Floyd Mother is what I heard with You. With Unplugged, which was the second tune, it was like a bluesy, dissonant hard rock guitar riff, and it sounded like Motorhead to me. Like legit sounded like fucking Ace of Spades in terms of like the verse was they went to a chord and he sung and they stayed on this chord like and he sung the vocal line and then it returned to like the hard rock kind of guitar riff, and that's kind of what Ace of Spades does. And then when Trains Brains and Rain, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, barely remember. I'm fucking right. It sounds like the Rolling Stones to me, kind of.
Yep.
And just like before, track number 5 sounded like the Kinks. Kind of sounded like You Really Got Me, but a little bit darker. If you listen back to that guitar riff and you think You Really Got Me by the Kinks, I guarantee you hear it. Guaranteed.
That was like the most metal song on this record, in my mind.
Yeah, it was dark.
Yeah.
Heavier kind of rock.
Yep.
So, and not to kind of take the mic too much here, but so those all kind of reminded me of those bands, like I said. So it's kind of like they're piecing together their influences and kind of finding their own sound. But then you got a little bit of what was like on track 6, She Is Death. They had kind of this like acoustic major 7 mellow chord kind of sounding thing that kind of started to remind me of stuff I was listening to on Yoshimi.
Yeah.
You know, with the acoustic chords and like the electric synthy sounds in the background.
And it's funny because my note on She Is Death, which I love that song, by the way. You know, if you're only going to listen to a couple of tracks on this album, I think you got to listen to With You, the opener, Jesus Shooting Heroin, which is the 4th song. And
shout out to the title.
Yeah, it's so crazy. But then She Is Death and Godzilla Flick too. Like those are the standouts to me. And She Is Death to me was the track that spoke most to what the Flaming Lips end up developing in much greater detail by the time that they get to like the mid to late 90s to the early 2000s. You know, the Soft Bulletin album, Yoshimi, even Embryonic a little bit after that. But yeah, that's all that stuff spoke to me on She Is Death. You can hear it. You can hear it in there.
My biggest takeaway from this album was that if they really wanted to, they could have done several different genres of music. They could have sold out and just been a straight ahead kind of alternative band, and they would have been really successful. Yeah. Like you hear Godzilla Flick is really cool, but it's more like mainstream. And I think they could have gone a lot of directions. They went their own unique direction that they definitely have their own type of sound, especially later on. So I think that they were sincere in their development and their growth as artists, but they were good enough that they could have been a punk band or like just an alternative band, radio rock band. They could have done anything.
Agreed. And speaking of Godzilla Flick, you guys seen the movie Get Him to the Greek?
Yes.
So that straight up sounded like, I would have believed that was an Infant Sorrow song. Even the vocals, like his voice sounded like Russell Brand's character in that.
I genuinely love that soundtrack, by the way.
Dude,
those songs are actually
good.
Really
like that's the thing is like some of those songs that were Infant Sorrow tunes were pretty solid, and I think that this Godzilla Flick would fit right in.
I loved the bass line on Godzilla Flick.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like because the bass line is it's not that the bass is carrying the melody. because it's kind of tough to even like discern a melody in that song in a lot of ways. But it just kind of floats in the background and it just kind of meanders around in a really, really cool way. I loved it.
Yeah.
Like I loved it. And the Flaming Lips are not one of those bands where I think to myself, oh man, I love this song because there's such standout bass playing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Not usually.
Yeah.
It was good. Yeah, I agree with you.
What did you guys think of Summertime Blues?
Fuck you.
What do you like that song, Lee?
No, not at all. I would cut that off the end of the album.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I'm
right there.
I thought it kind of. I mean, it was definitely stylistically different. I almost heard like rockabilly on that one.
Yes.
A tiny bit. It reminded me of I don't give a damn about my bad reputation. It reminded me of that song, big time. So that's just another
Joan Jett.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Well, it is a cover, right?
Yeah, Summertime Blues is absolutely a cover.
Okay.
Who did that? Because I was curious about that, but I didn't look it up.
You guys talk all
Can't
book.
be bothered to do that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, coming from Godzilla Flick, I was going to say going from Godzilla Flick to track 10, which is Staring at Sound / the reprise with you. I wrote that it just literally sounds like a different band, like between tracks 9 and 10. Like, just like Lee was saying, that kind of speaks to what he was saying about the fact that they could have gone in a different direction genre-wise. And I agree with that. So,
Eddie Cochran, kids.
Eddie Cochran.
Who was considered a rockabilly artist, according to Wikipedia.
Yeah. Who knows Wikipedia, though?
Yeah, so take that for what it's worth. Who knows what Wall Street Bets poster was? Was researching Summertime Blues. Yeah, listen, that song. The problem with that song to me is just it's been covered by so many different bands, and there wasn't anything new brought to it here. And so I'm with Lee, where I wish that the "With You" reprise on the song before, which was
the end.
Yeah. Because then you would have had the bookend of "With You" to begin, the "With You" reprise at the end, and it would have felt more.
I get you. I
honestly think that's what happened. I think they just tacked this song on to the end of the album as an afterthought, either to fill out time or just they wanted somewhere to throw it. But I'm really reaching for anything to criticize because I pretty much love this whole thing.
Yeah, so you're just looking for something to say in constructive criticism. Wise.
It was just jarring to me when I heard it at the end. It didn't seem like it fit there to me, but
yeah,
it did not stick out to me in that way. But I'm noticing that you guys both feel that way, so maybe I should give it a listen again and see what I think.
I'm not. Listen, to me, this is part of the reason why I wanted to go through this Reddit list. Because this album does not deserve to be on the big list. It doesn't.
Yeah. And so the verbiage on the list was kind of confusing because it says every Flaming Lips album. We've talked a little bit about this. I don't think they're implying that literally every Flaming Lips album was a snub. They're just saying Flaming Lips didn't get any mention on the list, and they probably should.
Correct.
So, but I think that we're doing the right thing, which is to go through all of them and decide which ones we think should be on the list.
Yeah.
And plus, it's cool to just kind of hear, the genesis of a band like Flaming Lips. And in the case of Queens of the Stone Age, we fucked up there. That was a waste of time. But it worked out.
Honestly, I know that I've told you guys this, but if you ever decide to foray back into that band, I think you should just skip straight to Songs for the Deaf. And if you don't like that album, you're not going to like Queens of the Stone Age. You can just quit there.
Well, and listen, the plan is absolutely to circle back.
Oh, yeah. We're going to be doing that.
We're going to circle back, but based on your recommendations and with viewers, right? Because you can absolutely interact with us on Facebook. You can interact with us on Insta. You can send us a message at anchor.fm/thissucks, or you can email us at thissucks@gmail.com.
Yes.
So Lee's vote is 4. I believe. Are you going to say Songs for the Deaf?
Is the only one that you wanted us to go over?
I think that's their best album, and if you don't find anything you can like about that album, you're not going to like any of the rest of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Listen.
Here's my thought, not against that, but like that maybe we should do a couple more Queens of the Stone Age, is that several of these bands have like looking at the Moody Blues, they have like, I don't even know how many albums the Moody Blues has. In fact, I'll find out.
475.
That can't be right. Did you just come up with that number out of your ass? Yes,
I just made that number up out of the air.
It's a high number, and I'm looking it up right now, but I'm not going to have it for a couple seconds.
It's got to be. I have to imagine that the Moody Blues at this point probably have north of 20 albums, is what my guess would be. He's still scrolling.
Counting.
Fuck. Wait, you're still scrolling and you're still counting?
At least 16 albums. And then
Wikipedia shows 16.
Yeah.
16 studio albums, 6 live albums, 24 compilation albums.
Okay. Right.
So that's a band where maybe we're going to skip around a little bit, but the Queen of the Stone Age have like maybe 4 or 5. That's one where we could theoretically cover every album.
Yes.
And bands like.
I mean, the Flaming Lips have. The Flaming Lips have a ton of albums too.
They do.
My thing with Queens of the Stone Age, I don't want you guys to just like. So you're only skipping one album because the second album is rated R. Mm-hmm. Then it's Songs for the Deaf.
Okay.
So like, I don't think you're going wildly out of order or anything, but I also don't want to see you guys just force your way through Queens of the Stone Age every album if you hate every album. I don't think anybody wants to just hear you guys torture yourselves with it. So that's just my opinion on it.
Yeah. No,
well, listen, what I do want is if anybody else out there, if any other listeners have any other feedback about what, if you're a Queens of the Stone Age fan, if you've heard some stuff that you think, wow, this is pretty good. Like, I dig it. Listen, let us know what you think is the best album once we circle back around to that. But in the spirit of full and fair disclosure, I mean, we got quite a bit of stuff that we're going to wind up doing before we circle back around to Queens of the Stone Age. So just to recap, Here It Is, I love this album. I think it's absolutely worth listening to. If you're like me, where you're a Flaming Lips fan of Soft Bulletin, Yoshimi, Embryonic, all the later stuff, go back and listen to this because it's really cool. It's really, really cool, if nothing else, just to listen to the roots of where they came from, because you can hear the older stuff in the roots, but you also get a better notion about why even the Flaming Lips fashion themselves as a punk rock band, because they are.
It's much better than I expected.
Yeah. Me too. I'm right there with you, Lee.
Because they have some really out there challenging stuff to the point that some of the stuff I've listened to, especially later on, has been stuff that I just genuinely don't even like. So I was curious what this was going to be like, and I was very pleasant, actually.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I was pleasantly surprised. And it was, again, the biggest surprise and what I enjoyed most was hearing the baby versions of the sounds that they later developed and some of the ways that they layer stuff, the way that they layer background vocals with instrumentals, with lead vocals. It's all there, it's buried on this one, but it's all there and it's really, really worth exploring. So
yeah, I agree.
I did add it to digital.
I did add it to digital as well.
Yeah.
And, I'm not like going to seek out the vinyl, but if I saw it, I'd buy it.
Yeah, I would too.
But at the same time, I could see this being a thing where it's rare and it's going to be like fucking $120.
Yeah, good luck finding it.
Probably not going to buy it at that price. But if I find it at a decent price, I would buy it.
Or a reissue, right? Like if you could find a reissue for $20,
I would do it.
I'd pick it up for $20 too.
What do you think, Lee? Would you buy the vinyl? Would you add it to digital?
So, I mean, I don't have a record player, but in theory, yes, I would buy it on vinyl. One thing I really liked about it is that I really liked Wayne Coyne singing on it because it was a little bit more varied and a little bit more range than what he comes up with later in his career.
Yeah.
The late stage Flaming Lips is really just that. I don't know if you would call it falsetto, but it's like that kind of super high pitched voice that he does that doesn't really move around a lot from that one kind of spot. And it was kind of interesting to hear like a young version of him where he was trying different techniques.
And it's occasionally falsetto. No, I wouldn't say that's a bad interpretation at all.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it should be on the list. I think there should be some Flaming Lips on the list, and we're going to get to that.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, while not being on the list, I'm really glad I listened to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wonderful new music to get exposed to, but it doesn't belong on a list of the greatest 500.
Yeah.
But if you're go ahead, Lee.
My favorite is the Soft Bulletin. Mike and I have always kind of argued that point back and forth. His is definitely Yoshimi. But I think we both agree that the other one is the second best. Those are the top two.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm definitely excited for JB to get to listen to the Soft Bulletin at some point once we get to that part.
Yeah, Lee, I haven't listened to Soft Bulletin at all yet. I probably listened to. For me, it's like if I'm going to listen to this, I want to really fall in love with one of the records before I get into the other one. And Mike had strongly recommended Yoshimi, so I started with that. I probably listened to Yoshimi 6 times at this point.
You can't go wrong with either one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do the same thing with Soft Bulletin.
And the Soft Bulletin will be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You know, even if you don't get to it until we get to it on the snub list.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be really, really good.
Cool. So, pretty solid recommendation on Here It Is, the debut album from Flaming Lips, from all of us, I would say.
Yeah.
And looking forward to next week. We got Alice in Chains coming up.
So what do you want to do on that? Are we going to do Facelift?
Absolutely, because it has fucking Man in the Box.
Fuck yeah. Okay.
Man, you know what's crazy about that is I got that list off of Reddit, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that there's no Alice in Chains made me nervous that list was wrong. I was like, what if I just got a list that was wrong? Because there has to be Alice in Chains. There has to be one album on that list.
Right?
It's a crime that it's not.
There's not. Yeah. And Alice in Chains is a band that I think you could make a legitimate argument that you have to listen to Facelift, you have to listen to Dirt, you have to listen to because now they've actually combined the Sap and Jar of Flies EPs together, like as their own single album, which I think we could do that in a single week, and then potentially even the self-titled. But I think that any of those first 3 albums, whether you consider Jar of Flies a standalone EP, and then Dirt and LP, Facelift and LP, any of those, I think there's really good arguments about any of those albums being on the list. So next,
Man in the Box, like how can you not have the record with that on the list? And probably one of the most famous grunge songs.
And I haven't peaked, so I don't know. But I know you guys are betting on the whole Nevermind being in the top, I don't know, 10 or 20 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If that album is in the top 10 and there's no Alice in Chains on this whole list, that is so fucking disrespectful to me.
Yeah,
I
agree.
It's like I'm like Melvin Capital shorting Nevermind. That's coming at me, and I'm pretty sure he's gonna win it.
I am. I'm running up hard on that. Facelift, though, it's funny that you keep coming back to Man in the Box, but literally, whether you're talking about Sea of Sorrow, whether you're talking about any of like the deeper cuts on the back half of like Sunshine is another song that it's like, fuck, they're so good. I'm really excited about going back.
Popularity though, and like influence. It's hard to snub that one.
Yeah, that particular song, because almost everybody knows Man in the Box, but at the same time, that album is rife with unbelievable, not just the songwriting on that album, but the harmonies. Yes, love, hate, love. We Die Young, Bleed the Freak. Like there's so many just unbelievable top-notch songs on that album. So listen, join us next week. The bonus episode we're going to be doing is going to be covering Facelift by Alice in Chains, one of the many records that were snubbed by the top 500. And then, of course, we're also going to be going back to the big list as well. And we went over that in the regular show. So come back next week and we'll talk about some Alice in Chains.
Yep. We'll see you next week. Thanks again.
Thank you guys.
For tuning in.
And thank you, Lee Stamper. Like, I'm glad that we were able to bring you back on for the bonus show so that we could talk a little bit more about the flips.
Yes.
And thank you for sticking around through the big show as well, even though we had some technical difficulties. We love having you, buddy.
Yeah, thankfully.
Thanks for having me. I love you guys, obviously.
Absolutely.
And to the listeners, life is too short to listen to Los Lobos.
You heard it here first.
Join us next week. Bye-bye.
All right, I am going to go eat because I haven't eaten since 10 a.m. So, bye-bye. And it's midnight. So good night, guys.